Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to warn you, before people said, Rabbi, how long should you speak for? People can't focus for a long time. So I'm warning you now, if you can't focus for too long, if like me, you have ADHD, you know what I tell people, you know what ADHD stands for? Attention Deficit. Hey, donut. If that's what you have, I'm telling you now to shut off because it's going to be 10 minutes. But if you want to hear a thought that's meaningful, that hopefully will inspire you, that will lead you into Shabbos, then listen on. So this week is a very special Shabbos. It's kind of like, you know, you think about the magnitude of Shabbos. It has two portions, Vayakel Pekudei. We finished the book of Exodus. We read in the second Sefer Torah, we read about Parshat HaChodesh. We bless the new month of Nisan, which is the month of miracles, and yet we're all going to be at home. For some of us, it doesn't make a difference. How often do we go to Shul? Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur? By then, Shul will be open again. But for some of us, it's hard. And people have been calling me. I know my father may live in Leuel. He's turning 80 soon, and he doesn't miss, I don't know if he could count any Shabbos that he's ever missed a minyan, or maybe on a handful. And here he is going to be so close to so many Jews, yet staying at home and not being able to daven with the minyan. So I want to give you a thought. Vayakel, which is the first portion we read, Vayakel means to unite. The day after Yom Kippur, Moses came down and all the people came together. Pekudei, which is the second portion we read, means to count individualities, individuals. Moses, as he finishes building the tabernacle for God, counts every donation that all the Jewish people gave towards the tabernacle. Now, in general, in Judaism, we say that the name of the Torah portion emphasizes and connects with the significance of the portion. So the question, of course, arises, Vayakel means unity. Pekudei means individuality. How do they come together as one? The question is even greater, because in the portion of Pekudei, Pekudei means to count, right? Each individual contribution, Moses counted every contribution the Jews gave. Question is why? What was the significance to tell us each detail? Why couldn't he just say that Moses counted everything without telling us everything? But more importantly, the portion of Pekudei really speaks about how the Mishkan became united as one. So the portion is called Pekudei, which means to count in detail, yet it speaks about the unity. So we have the contrast of Vayakel and Pekudei, and then within Pekudei we have the contrast. Well, the question was brought up by the Lubavitcher Rebbe in his Farbrengen, in his talk of Parshas Vayakel Pekudei in 1981 and 1982, and also in the last Farbrengen that the Rebbe gave, which was 28 years ago, Parshas Vayakel, the last words we ever heard from the Rebbe to this day. And the Rebbe says like this: Bereshis is a book of individuals. We read about Abraham, about Sarah, about Adam and Eve, Noah. We read about Judah, about Joseph, about Jacob. And you go through all the great people we read about. Shmois is a book of community building, nation building. Yes, we read about Moses and Aaron and Miriam and Pharaoh and Jethro and Shifra and Puah, but all in the sense of how they're building community, of how they are connecting to build a nation. The question is, we start the book of Shemais with building a nation, which culminates at the giving of Torah at Sinai. We go from being Bnei Yisrael in Genesis, the children of Israel, to Am Yisrael, to the people of Israel. And then happens the greatest tragedy where the Jews, only 40 days after getting the golden calf, sin, after getting the tablets, sin with the golden calf. And Moses pleads with God to come from a deeper place and to build a tabernacle, to leave his divinity, to bring his divinity and his presence even greater amongst the people. And Moses succeeds. And Hashem builds a tabernacle. A tabernacle built by the people. It was the home of the people, for the people, by the people. It was the home of the people. Every Jew had a connection to the Mishkan. It was a home by the people. It was built with the gold and the silver of every Jew. And it was a home for the people. And it was a home built by the people, for every single one. As Lincoln said in his famous address, this was the first place built like that. The question, of course, arises, but what's more important? The community or the individual? Is it about is my only significance of I with what I contribute to the we? Or is there a significance in the I as itself? Do I have any significance as an individual, or is it only as part of building the community? And that's why at the end of Shemais, when Moses is about to finish the book where God's divinity comes to the Mishkan, Moshe wants to remind the Jewish people how important it is in Judaism, not just the community, but also the individual. That every single individual counts. You know, in the 1860s, there was one of the greatest conductors and masters of music, whose name was Arturo Toscanini, and he was very famous. And he had a biographer who was writing a book about him, and he would come often to see him to get a glimpse about it. And one day he calls him, he says, I happen to be in Italy, could I come visit you? And Arturo says, not tonight. And he says, why not tonight? He says, because tonight I'm going to be listening on shortwave radio to a concert of 120 musicians, which is going to be taking place 6,000 miles away. I was their conductor, but unfortunately I can't be there and I want to listen to it. So his biographer says, listen, I promise I'll come, I'll be quiet, I won't say a word, but I want to watch you how you listen. So he agrees, and he comes and he watches, they listen together on the shortwave radio, and at the end, he turns to Arturo and he says, tell me, wasn't that amazing? And Arturo looks at him and says, it was okay. He says, what do you mean it was okay? He says, well, there was 120 musicians, there was supposed to be 15 violinists, but only 14 played. His biographer looks at him, how does he know over 6,000 miles away in shortwave radio? But he doesn't want to say anything. But the next morning, of course, he calls International and he finds out, he says, tell me, how many people were supposed to be in this musical? And he says, there was supposed to be 120. He says, but 15 violinists and only 14 came. And the biographer thinks, how did he know this? So he comes back to him, he says, you got to tell me, this is fascinating. How did you know over 6,000 miles away over shortwave radio that there was one violinist missing? And Arturo looks at him and says, you don't understand. To you, as someone who was listening to it, it was beautiful. But to me, as the conductor has to know every note and every detail of the note. And when I listened through all the notes, and I knew one of the violinists was missing because one of the notes were not there. The same thing is true in the Torah and what Moshe Rabbeinu was telling us. What Moshe Rabbeinu was telling the Jewish people was that each one of us, as much as we're an I, as much as we are part of a community, it can't come at the expense of our individuality. Each one of us has a note that's unique to play, that Hashem listens to as the conductor, as the master, and wants to hear that specific note. You know, a comedian once said that a graduation is the only place where we have thousands of students in identical hats and gowns, and we tell them how individuality is the key to our success. Imagine. We're all dressed the same, but individuality is the key to our success. I think Jonathan Saxon says that he once asked Paul Johnson, who wrote his Mastery, the History of the Jewish People. He says, tell me, what do you think? Tell me something of what you think of the Jewish people. And he says, you know, we've had all kind of societies. We've had China, which has focused on community building, on nation people. And then we have the West, America, which focused on the individual. But there hasn't been anyone like the Jewish people that has been able to master the balance between community, between the nation building, and between the individuality. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu is telling us. as he finishes building the tabernacle and the Jews are ready to have the divinity of God, he says, listen, in Pekudei, I'm going to count every single donation given by every single Jew, because every contribution counts, and there's no community without individuality. Each one of us is important. And that's why if you go back to Genesis, when God blesses the Jewish people, he tells Abraham, he promises, your people will be as great as the stars and the sand. Why does he say both? There's much more stars than there is sand. Billions of galaxies. You know why? The sand on the beach, if you take one speck of sand, it's nothing. Only when it's together. Millions of them on the beach does it form a sand for a beach. But when you take stars, each star shines on its own. And that's what God was telling Abraham when he blessed him. He says, your children will be like the sand on the beach. Where as a community, they'll be so powerful, but they'll also be like the stars, where their individuality will shine, the focus on who they are. My friends, there is no greater time than the time we stand in now where we could see this. From one sense, we're all in solitary confinement. We're all, so to speak, in social distance, quarantine. We're away from everyone. We're focused on the individual to be away. Why? Because we're worrying about the community. But really, when we worry about the community, we're worrying about each individual. We're telling everyone you have to stay away, because without you staying away, you're going to hurt somebody else. And that's the message as we go to say Chazak, Chazak, V'nis Chazek. We won't be in shul tomorrow, but we'll be at home reading the Torah portion of Vayakhel Pekudei. And we'll remember the greatest message that Moshe gave the Jewish people. That you have to be united as one, but it can't come at the expense of the individual. Every individual is unique and important and has something to contribute to society that no one has ever contributed before, and no one will ever contribute after. And that's why we have to remember that we're like the stars in the sand. We have our community, but we always also have our individuality. So take the time this Shabbos to focus on all our loved ones in our home, and see their uniqueness and their individuality and the gift that God gave them that no one else has. And think about how together we build the greatest community, the greatest nation. Good Shabbos. Join us at 6:20. We'll have a pre-Shabbos l'chaim, and we'll sing the beginning of Shabbos services that are allowed to sing, that you're allowed to sing before Shabbos comes in, and then we'll, of course, shut our phones because we don't have phones on Shabbos. You can also join Gruni at 12 o'clock in our kitchen as she does a virtual challah bake, as all of us can bake challah at home for our families and our homes. Good Shabbos.